everyone. Almost 4 months ago, our way of life hit a huge wall. In the span of few days, everything shut down. Transport, airline, businesses, offices, travel. And while the health statistics were arriving quickly and we knew where there were cases and what was happening, data quantifying economic damage took much longer to come in. Clearly, the virus has cost organizations billions in lost revenues. I mean, that's what we've been talking just before, we got rolling onto this session. But COVID is causing more than just financial damage. Leaders are keeping fearful employees motivated while making bold strategic changes to plans they would have taken months to create last year. There is a need to support leaders of all organizations, and this is where and this is what we would like to focus in on today's discussion. I would like to bring in my panelists onto the session and hear from them what they have been doing to support the leaders, develop them and help them. So we have with us Mr. Anil Noronha, Chief People Officer at Fullerton India, Ms. Pooja Bansal, HR Head, Piaggio Vehicles, Mr. Vibhash Nayak, Head HR and L&D at HDFC Life, and Mr. Vikram Khanna, HR Head at Magma Housing. Thank you, panelists, for joining us this session. We all know that this has been a very difficult time for employees, for leaders, for organizations, for families, and community at large. However, as they say, leaders must lead from the front, exhibiting values and behaviors they expect from the team. However, leading from the front just doesn't mean that you are being isolated. During this pandemic, what, as per you, has changed for leaders in your organization, and how are they coping with the change? I would actually, get started by opening this to all four of you to just get your views on what's happening, in your organization, how are leaders coping, and what is the big change that they're all experiencing right now. So, Anil, start with you.
Yeah, so it's been quite interesting times, right? Because leaders are expected to lead businesses, grow businesses, and bring in sustainable, profitable growth. And suddenly the focus has moved to cost management, portfolio protection, and so one of the big things that we see is there's a whole set of new competencies that leaders have to really dig deep within themselves and find whether they actually have it in them, because it's become so paradoxical, right? It's bravery, for example, or resilience and courage, and some of these are the competencies that we keep hearing, which was never part of when we did our succession planning exercise and to see what competencies successful leaders needed, etc. These were not the competencies that really came as amongst the top 3-5, etc. For example, paradox of saving lives and saving a business, or financial or operational excellence, and looking at what tactical and operating measures we can do today and yet redesigning for the future. So that is something that I clearly see is visible, and I can only say that this experience will make those leaders who adapt really well better leaders for the future. And it's also putting a lot of strain in terms of the investments we've made in leadership development in the past, and how that is going to transition and change going forward, and what tweaks those plans we would have to make. So yeah, that's clearly coming through.
And you see the leaders in your organization adopting to this change very quickly. Have you as an organization given any inputs in the last few months to the leaders?
So we work as a very close unit. Yes, you will find that because human beings are different, we are not clones, right? So certain people, certain leaders you thought never had, or you thought they were kind of, the just bordering around, in between an ME plus or meets expectation plus kind of leaders, suddenly finding that they shape up really well given the new scenario, because those competencies were not really required to come to the fore in the past. So we've seen both, those kinds of leaders. We've of course provided a environment, or created an environment where we're pretty much quick off the blocks in terms of putting certain work streams in place, clearly identifying what our 5 or 6 focus areas will be. So we've done a lot of things, and then providing that ecosystem for people, not only as the next level, also providing them with an opportunity to deliver what is required, given what are I think Vikram said it a little while earlier, uh, 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 you know, retweaked plans were. What we decided in March as what our FY21 plans would be, were constantly changing and being tweaked. And even as I speak, post unlock has happened, and post green shoot, suddenly we're talking of, from we moved from saying no headcount, headcount freeze, to, should we really, aggressively start leaving people, to actually starting to say that we probably need to hire people, going forward. So it's changing so fast, and sometimes keeping pace with that paradoxical situation, where you're expected to be defensive as well as offensive, both kinds of, which is quite amazing to witness and unfold,
Right.
for HR folks and for leaders as well. So.
Absolutely. I think the true test of the term VUCA that we as HR people keep talking about has hit us directly now. And how do we manage this in such a volatile world? I think, like you said, Anil, every day there is a new plan, and probably that gets executed for the next 24 hours, and then you have to come up with something else
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
something else. So
Yeah, because see, at the end of the day, we all have to be competitive, and there is a business to run.
absolutely.
And without a successful business, there is no workplace and there is no job, right? So it's quite, this is the kind of language or the terminologies we actually in HR haven't been accustomed to using forever, I would say.
Right.
Quite interesting.
Yeah. So obviously different skill sets required as well, right? Like you said, bravery, resilience. These were probably terminologies we had never used in the past for any leader or any employee, but suddenly now that's coming to the forefront.
Yeah, on one hand that, and on the other hand, also empathy, self-awareness, being sensitive, being emotionally, really strong, compassionate. So yeah, leaders tend to be, like we sometimes say, बहुत ruthless leader hai, he's very focused, etc. And then suddenly you say, you have to be. So that's what I meant by saying paradoxical, in several ways. And it can be quite stressful, challenging, not only for HR folks, but for leaders as well. And I think it's extremely important for us to work together as we see through this almost on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks. Pooja, what about your organization?
All right. So, like Anil mentioned, that every organization has gone through a lot of changes in the business priority. For us, we follow the calendar year. So, obviously, for us, the last quarter of the year is when you start planning how the business is going to be for the following year and what are the investments. And now, when I say investments, not just necessarily the infrastructural investments, but it's also the people investment. What kind of do in people as well. And in true sense, when we were hit with this, unprecedented situation in the month of March, I think a lot has changed for organization. A lot has moved from what you had planned and where you're moving. And as HR folks as well, for us, whatever you had planned in the pipeline for the entire year of 2020, it doesn't really stay the same. So today as leaders, what has really changed is that, at least in my organization, we see that as and when the time is moving, people have to take decisions. There is nothing or nobody actually today in the organization who can say, oh, I can by oath tell you what's going to happen after 1 month or what's going to happen after 45 days. And that's what leaders are doing. And in spite of so much of ambiguity and absolutely no forecasting works in today's situation. Like, even with your lockdown, unlock, it's very obvious that you just 24 hours back, you get to know there's another lockdown that's coming up. So how can you expect the leaders to really give you a forecast in terms of business? There is tremendous pressure, because even then the leaders are expected to deliver. Even then the leaders are expected to ensure that the business is intact. And the cost pressure continues to weigh in, but even the profits. So it's not just about curtailing the cost, it's also ensuring that at least, your EBIT looks into positive. It's not going negative, negative, negative. The financials play a larger role. So here comes the real technique and the art of leaders to how to have the real sense of financial acumen here. So that's more. As an organization in the past 6 months, with so much of volatile environment that you have, I think as an organization we've really invested into people. We've not really forgotten that they need to learn, or they need to deal with this situation with a new set of skills. And for us, today we feel that emotional quotient plays a very important role. With so much of emotions that are running in the people and that is running in the business, with so much of emotions which is also running in the environment, because finally that impacts your people and which impacts us directly and indirectly. It's not organization environment that plays an important role today. It's the larger environment, the society at large, which is impacting us. So we did a lot around emotional intelligence, a lot about emotional quotient. And as an organization, we did this as small modules here and there. But I think in the last 4 months, we really played it all around that. And we did ensure that leaders play a very important role in listening to people, in empathizing with them, understanding the personal needs, but at the same time, a balance with the organization objectives. It's very easy said than done, that the leaders have to have the people perspective, need to play empathy, need to understand the problems. But at the same time, when you look at a leader, and especially the business functional leaders, they have another responsibility towards business as well. So we have, as HR, have started understanding that it requires a very different skill when you want to balance the true sense of having the business objectives in place, but at the same time, you need to also, take care of your people and have the people perspective in mind. So here for us, I think emotional intelligence or emotional quotient played a very important role.
Wow. Thanks, Pooja. I heard the word empathy from you as well, and that's what Anil was also emphasizing. And I think it's very important that leaders empathize with their team members and vice versa, because what we're also seeing is that the team members end up saying, "Oh, but the leader should understand." But I think it's the other way around. Leaders are as human as team members can be, and it's only right that each one of us do what we're expected to do in our frame of things. And like you said, changing constantly, whether it's financial plans, whether it's people plans, I think that's really what has given us also the push. I think it's also given us a good shake from status quo, right? I mean, we moved out of status quo completely. And if you're saying that you're using, you're giving them small modules, you're giving them, continuous learning, I think that's a great thing, because I guess engagement with employees at various levels is also very critical, especially during these times when all of us are all over the place. We don't see each other. There are no team meetings. There are no lunches happening. There are no get-togethers happening, and you're not really coming into offices. So I think that's also very important. Vibhash, your views on what I asked.
Yeah, so very similar actually. Before we get into in terms of how leaders have adopted, I think it's very important to know in terms of the context that played out. And even before COVID, the fact that businesses are volatile, uncertain, it's a very complex world, and you got to kind of adapt to it. There can be digital disruption that will happen, so on and so forth. So all progressive large organizations would prepare themselves for a uncertainty that would play out sometime in the future. And then most of the solutions would be digital solutions, so on and so forth. And disruption is something that you should be expecting to happen. And how do you prepare for it? And if I know for a fact, I think all organizations also have plans in place, right? But when this COVID thing happened, I don't think the plan or the BCP plan, the so-called BCP plan, really came into play. Your BCP plan typically would be, what if the whole city was to shut down, okay, because of rains or storm or fire or whatever that sort, and the plan would mean that okay, you'll operate from another city. Nobody expected the whole country or whole world to kind of lock down in some sense. So what's happening is when this happened, leadership, it was not just, leader is not just based on hierarchy or based on grade or based on a title that a person holds. You needed to kind of bank on collective leadership.
Yeah.
People had deep rooted beliefs. People had traditional beliefs in terms of how work needs to be done, and all of that was getting challenged. In a normal scenario, probably we would have done a panel discussion, in a physical environment, but situation just forced us to kind of adopt. And it's heartening to see that whatever the situation, I think generally people adopt quickly.
Yeah.
If you have an environment where you've nurtured a learning environment where people are agile, people typically adapt.
Yeah.
We've seen that happening in our organization as well. Quickly, tag teams were formed. Zonal teams would kind of take calls. You needed to be agile. You needed to kind of relook or review your plans, which you would typically do for a year, and look at quarterly plans, monthly plans. You needed a set of leaders who would quickly take decisions on the fly.
Yeah.
Having said that, you also needed to kind of keep on listening to people and keep on communicating with them. So communicate, and in every communication that you did with your people, you needed to kind of have empathy, which I heard from my other co-panelists as well. There needed to be, so while you're trying to kind of take care of business, it was also important for you to kind of show that you care for your employees. There is empathy, and those were certain things that kind of played out. So that's what we did here in HDFC Life. Again, post the lockdown, multiple engagement initiatives, including capability building, skill building. A lot of initiatives were also kind of taken up within the company.
Okay. So, I mean, again, I think agility, humility, is very important for leaders in any given situation, but even so right now, because if our leaders are not agile enough to adopt to the changing environment, I think then the organization also suffers, not only them and their team members. And I think, Vibhash, if your team has been able to get that right, I mean, kudos to your organization for putting that in place and ensuring that your leaders are doing what they're expected to do. Vikram, any experience from your side?
So a couple of things very quickly. I mean, I understand there's a lot of time spent on this part, but the fact here is that I consider this as turning corporates into an army unit. Mm-hmm. I mean, where you have to cover ground, where you have to ensure lives are safe, where you have to keep telling people how to embrace uncertainty, how to navigate through this complex environment. As very rightly, Anil, Vibhash, Pooja said that lead with empathy, curiosity, passion, be fast, decisive, all of these, run into fire, fine. Right? Who knew how to do it? Who was trained to take care of this black swan event? None of us. And yes, we become leaders, but we are also human beings. Leaders also need to be trained, taught, informed, nurtured, guided into this. Nobody knew what to do. Nobody knew suddenly if I tell this person to go out on the market, his life is in danger. This is as good as being an army colonel telling your people to go for a patrol.
Correct.
Right? So from our perspective of the organization, I think we over-communicated. I think right from the MD, Mr. Chamaria, to the CPO, Mr. Mishra, Mr. Rajneesh Mishra, to all the CEOs. Like every month we have an MD Vartalap that we call it with the top leadership of 72, 73 people all across India. Mm-hmm. And then the CEOs do their connect session every month with the teams down below to keep them engaged, to keep them charged, to guide them, because nobody knows what is the right thing, right? Yeah, it is easy for us to say that, we should train our people to have empathy, resilience, but nobody actually knows on the ground what to do. And on the same time, how do you keep them charged to run business? Mm-hmm. I think it's more of creating avenue. HR's job in our organization was to create these over communication, channels and platforms. Other important aspect was to guide the leaders on how to manage virtual teams, how to set up virtual teams, how to use Zoom, how to use these kind of video platforms, not only internally, but externally with your dealers, DSAs, with your channel partners, with your customers for that matter. Tele collections is one of our major areas. how do I, as an L&D team, educate my employees, leaders, to educate the customers to use Zoom for these kind of tele-collections? People who are used to going to the door and doing collections, how do I do it? So there was a lot of work that has happened to inform, nurture, and guide people in this. The development will happen now after this quarter. But right now, it was more of helping them settling down through this time.
Right, right, absolutely. And I think you mentioned over communication, but I personally believe there's nothing called over communication. I mean, the more we communicate with our team members, with our leaders, with our employees, the better it is, especially given the uncertain times we're living in right now. We don't know what tomorrow holds for us. So yeah, Vikram.
Geeti, I'll just share one more thing. Every day in the morning at 9:30, there's something called Chai Pe Charcha that we do.
Okay.
Every leader logs into his team in the morning at 9:30 or 10, whatever time. And every day they are supposed to do a video huddle with their team to ensure that they keep them up. I think that is one of our major, breakthroughs that we've been able to do in the first month of the COVID hitting us.
Right. I think absolutely being in touch with our team members and our employees is very important, as much as it's important to be in touch with our customers, who are actually paying our bills. So how do we do that overall is what is needed. You mentioned as L&D folks, and something that I keep hearing from a lot of L&D people in the last few months is that this time, when the pandemic happened and the lockdown happened, I think L&D as a function has come up as the most needed and required function. And then I think L&D folks have never been this busy, is what I keep hearing from, right? So do you think L&D strategies for leadership's development has changed right now, will change in the near future? Anil, any views? You're on mute. Sorry.
So yes, I believe it will change. It is already changing, right? It's getting more virtual. It's getting more online. But I an important distinction I'd like to make is, one is how do you really operationalize that, and how do you make that make that work for you?
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that the purpose of any leadership development program, that purpose we should not lose focus of, because it's to bring behavioral change, whether it is to and to get outcomes, right? So that, I think, does not change. So whether you use digital means going forward, for example, we are transitioning, we don't know whether this will work, and we see there's a huge focus on cost management and cost saves. And of course, L&D budgets are getting slashed, and we're getting budgets, for digital initiatives. But over the next few quarters, if this continues and the digital initiatives don't give us the resultant benefits, we can be sure, as L&D professionals, that even our digital budgets will get slashed further. So what we need to be very, very, clear about what are we trying to achieve. For example, I like to use this nice quadrant which says that, okay, this is what I deliver or what I do, which is the competencies required for me to be successful in the job, and this is the experience I have, because past experience is a predictor of future success or future experiences. But the potential bit, which are the drivers and the attributes that sit below, and actually define who I am as a person. It's like an iceberg model. What lies beneath is actually more important than what is visible. Right. So those are so I think that still does not change. And how do you ensure that you deliver those outcomes, those behavioral outcomes as a L&D professional, as HR professionals, as leaders, going ahead will actually define, whether the changed models, will continue. At the same time, there is also a reverse pressure if we really work well, because in the past, we've always had this great experience of being in the classroom or using the 70-20-10 model, etc., right. etc. When we then call leaders into a classroom, we better be sure that, we have something really special for them when they come back to the classroom than what they've been used to in the past. So it's again, paradoxical. So I think there's both a challenge and an opportunity for L&D professionals. It's definitely going to be virtual for sure going ahead, you know.
Yeah, yeah. But has the adoption of virtual learning increased for you and your leaders, Anil?
Of course, it has. It has for everybody. You know, I was on another panel, on a global panel, and someone there, I think was the Twitter HR head or somebody there mentioned, or a HP HR head, I think, mentioned that, you know, some of these e-learning companies, I mean, MS Teams, for example, you know,
Yeah.
Microsoft Teams, their product targets, you know, which they had envisaged, you know, they would achieve 10 years hence, you know, they had achieved in about a quarter, because they never, who expected, you know, COVID to happen. So 10-year future targets, 3 quarter, 1 quarter mein ho gaya. The same was for a lot of e-learning companies who had really future ready products now, but were not getting the traction, but COVID has given them the traction. So I think a lot of the tools and the technologies is out there. It's for us to actually make it work for our organization such that, and not get stuck with the technology, you know, actually ensure that the primary purpose of leadership, you know, and I said that a little earlier, you know, though that is not missed out in this fad to get all the technologies in, because then we won't be left with even those budgets, you know, you can be sure.
Absolutely. And I think outcome-based learning is really, you know, something that most L&D professionals would want to drive. But right now, it's all the more critical, because if people are not seeing the you know, relevant outcome, you know, what's the point of doing, you know, a tick mark and saying I finished this program and those many hours of learning, you know, for the leaders or for our employees, because if you're not getting, like you rightly said, right? I mean, if you're not delivering outcomes through L&D programs, right? There's no need to do L&D at the given situation.
Yeah.
Ash, is this your experience? I mean, are you also using a lot of digital tools for
so as an organization, we've always had more than 95% adoption on online learning, and we've been doing it since almost, I think, 2011 or so. So online learning is something which is as part of the learning culture within HDFC Life. You know, we've got almost 95% adoption. 6 years back, we also launched a mobile learning platform. So it's like, you know, learning on the go. You can, you have bite-sized learning modules which are available. And there are all kinds of training programs around products, processes, you know, for salespeople who are typically not in office, you can kind of, you know, learn and do things on your own, so on and so forth. We also have a very large training team, like, you know, almost life insurance companies. We've got close to around 400 plus trainers. And these trainers, they do classroom trainings for distributors and employees. And obviously, post-COVID, since nobody was coming to office, how do you carry out these classroom sessions? And, you know, I remember in every, at the beginning of the year, when we would come up with our L&D strategy, we would talk about virtual training and how we should kind of, you know, reduce our dependency on classroom training and get into virtual training, so on and so forth. You know, from doing that brainstorming session here, we did not have a choice. And I think 22nd is when the lockdown happened. I think in a week's time, all trainers got into virtual training sessions. Initially, it was Zoom, eventually Google Meet, so on and so forth. And we were pleasantly surprised to see, in fact, the adoption or the number of participants coming for some of these trainings, whether it was agents or employees, was more than what you would typically see in a classroom session. And initially, there were teething issues because, you know, everyone was getting used to the tool and also figuring out a way to kind of, you know, train your learners. But if schools and colleges can do it, you know, as adults, you know, in corporate, I think it wasn't very difficult for us to kind of quickly get this going. So I think the adoption is beautiful. In fact, we are seeing increase in the number of participants, voluntary participants kind of coming for these training programs. And, you know, sales training is pretty rigorous. So every day there are virtual training sessions that happen for a couple of hours in different branches across the country. The other thing that we did was we curated a set of courses, and these courses could be from Udemy to a Coursera to, you know, different learning service providers, and we curated these courses for a set of people based on their requirements. And in a normal scenario, you know, the training team would push people to do training programs because you paid for it, so on and so forth. In this case, again, pleasantly surprised. The number of people who have voluntarily picked up different courses, completed the certifications, We also gamified it and recognized people who kind of did it. But generally, I think, in fact, we are in a situation where we are thinking that, do we really require so many training rooms across all our 400 branches? Can we scale up this entire virtual training model, and can this be the new normal?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, in fact, this COVID has been a blessing in disguise in terms of, reimagining the entire L&D landscape for us.
True, absolutely. And I think, like Anil was saying, and what you've also mentioned, I think in India specifically, our technology adoption has preponed by probably 2 decades, if not more, right? I mean, we wouldn't have pushed ourselves, like Vibhash, you were also saying, can we do 400 salespeople together in a virtual session? You wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise. And all businesses would end up saying, "Abhi time nahi hai, training ki zarurat nahi hai." So,
just to give you an example, we had planned for a 2.5 days, if I'm not mistaken, a workshop. Okay, a workshop where you would have virtual, you would have teams, and those teams would then brainstorm on a set of things, so on and so forth. The same program was done over a period of 6 days on a virtual platform on Zoom, wherein you could have breakout rooms, and within the break, and the feedback that we got from all the participants was, we never felt as if we were not there in a physical environment.
Absolutely.
Really didn't matter in terms of, so it's just made us think about things very differently.
Absolutely. So whenever things go back to some normalcy, right? Vikram and Pooja, something that keeps playing in my mind is, will we ever go back to the good old days of L&D, of learning? Will we get leaders in classroom? Will we get the, team members in classroom, or are classrooms, a way of the past, only looking at more virtual and more, digital learning? Vikram, would you want to go first?
So I think this is the new normal. I don't think there is anything more normalizing in the near future. There are a couple of things that I want to say. Of course, digital is here to stay, but meaningful changes in behavior and leadership will only come if there is proper feedback, introspection, and certain times. It's not about doing courses. It's more of my personal view. It's more about how one does retrospection, how one looks at feedback, how one takes it and then changes. Major changes would require at least intervention by a mentor or a guide. That will be something that will still stay for a while. That will not go, whether virtually, whether in person, that's another thing. But I think doing instructor-led trainings is something which is going to take a while to come back. It's not going to come right away, because people in the last 4 months, as Vivas was also saying, a lot of myths, especially in the NBFC space, that you have to come to office, otherwise you can't work in an NBFC environment, has totally broken down. So now all the organizations are looking at a very branch light, infra light kind of an environment to work in. So, and as Anil sir was also saying, that it's more about saving costs right now. So I personally feel coaching, mentoring, peer learning and leadership, that is going to be staying. The other important thing one has to be, and a lot of L&D professionals here, I would like to share a couple of points, is a lot of internal leadership depth one has in an organization. It's time to start calling your CEOs to take session for your VPs and your AVPs. It's time for you to call your department heads to tell their learning journeys and their journeys of becoming a leader. What were their challenges? Of course, it is totally different right now, but somewhere these inspirations are very low cost inspirations within the organization, which we need to start virtually tapping now. Yes, of course, there are a lot of other, inputs that you can get from outside, but internal leaders, when they train people, talk to people, do these kind of sessions, give a very near reality perspective to leaders to grow. So I think that is one of the areas for especially leadership foundation upwards level. A lot of internal leverage has to happen, which is a low cost.
Absolutely. And I think that gives in a lot of motivation to people within the organization as well, right? We've seen the leaders go up the ranks, right? Pooja, for your organization, are classrooms thing of the past?
All right. So in Piaggio, being an automobile company and a very, very technology-driven organization as well, we always believed into classroom, and that specifically when you need to learn certain technical matters, which you just learn when you do it, when you actually see it happening. Though this is one organization which definitely believed into virtual sessions, so we had like a 50-50 kind of an L&D model always. So it wasn't too difficult when we actually took everybody virtual with a 95% or 100% now virtual, because people were already used to it. Now, what's really worked in our advantage is I think it's given an opportunity to the L&D professionals in this company to be a little more innovative. Now, innovative in what sense? I mean, earlier when you had classrooms and you had these technical modules, so there was a lot of investment of time when you designed a technical module, because this is so very, very customized to your product, to every component that goes into your product. So these are not courses which is available, customized. And we were spending a lot of time. So what were you doing was just creating one customized model and taking 100 people on that module. Why? Because you were investing a lot of time customizing it. Right. But today, this virtual setup has helped us actually getting into minute customizations as well. Because the cost, there is an advantage of a cost now. So, fortunately, what is offered in the market is also now cost-effective solutions. And with this, when you get into minute customization, you can actually have the same content or same objective being delivered in different ways to different category of people. So when you want to do something on innovation, for example, for a leadership team, you can have a content which is so very customized for leadership team, vis-a-vis to a middle manager, vis-a-vis to junior management, but the message that you're giving through is completely the same. So I think we've been very innovative there. We're spending a lot of time in really getting into minute customizations rather than just having one session and putting it across. So even in the technical areas, it's helping us. And this is what has changed. And as rightly mentioned by the other co-panelists, I think people have also seen that the advantage of getting into a virtual mode. One advantage is that you can actually define your own learning journey. It gives you a lot of flexibility. Another advantage is it's helped the business understand, and that is why I think people are really participating, and you see more than expected participation because your work is not getting hampered. When you were called in a classroom, you were shut off for 1 day, 2 day, 3 day. But when you're actually in a virtual mode, the best module or the best way to deliver a virtual is to break it up into minor sessions and just have 2 hours, 3 hours a day, and then break it up into multiple days. So what's happening is people are able to concentrate on their business, their deliverables, their targets, getting into meetings, getting into customer calls, but at the same time, they're also paying attention to the learning. Now, it also gives us an opportunity of closing the gap between what you teach or what you learn and when you do it. So important to make a virtual session very successful, and which we have experimented here, is we just don't let it be like an event. It doesn't end with a certification for people. What's important is that every module that you would ask people to go through after the certification, the people have to have enough time to apply the learnings that they've gone through a virtual mode. And I can tell you that today's scenario gives us so many opportunities to design real-time projects that people can work, because everything has changed, right? So there is an opportunity in everything that you are doing in the organization. So you can actually have projects, live projects given to people after the virtual mode of experiential training and ask them to really apply the learning. And that's what we've adopted here. So our L&D doesn't end with just certifications and with, we have this system of really encouraging learning. So, you get these brownie points at the end of the certifications, and it helps you to keep you engaged. So that's about engagement of the people. But to really see what is the ROI, it's very important that we are able to do something more, much more than just imparting the training. And that's what we've tried to be in these times, even when we are fully virtual. So giving them real-time projects, real-time cases, giving them real-time review sessions with the leaders, giving them real-time experiential sharing sessions, and that's what continues the learning in Piaggio.
Okay. Thanks, Pooja. I mean, the both Vikram and Pooja, what you mentioned, and kind of preempted my next few questions to all of you, right? So one question that I have, and maybe Vibhash, you may want to take it, is continuous learning for leaders, and if so, how does it help?
COVID, post-COVID, pre-COVID, continuous learning. I think till the time you want to exist, you got to kind of learn. In fact, the way I look at it is you got to unlearn, learn, and relearn. I think what's also important is, as you kind of progress in your career, some beliefs are so deep rooted that if you don't unlearn some of those things, it's very difficult for you to adapt to the new future. So yes, continuous learning is something which is absolutely important. And when I say learning, it's not necessarily limited to a classroom session or going for a training program somewhere. I think as a leader, there are various ways in which you could possibly learn. You can build your perspectives by probably attending a webinar, a seminar, to micro learning, to reading, to talking people with similar kind of thought. But till the time you're curious, I think you'll keep on learning.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely important for you to survive.
But as organizations, how do we ensure leaders continue to learn? Because self-learning or, doing things by oneself is very different. But is there a learning path that we as organizations can create for leaders?
So the way I look at it is there are two ways in terms of which you can create a learning ecosystem. One is as an organization, you carve out a path for people. Okay. And invariably, when you carve out a path, you carve out a path for a cohort of talent. Okay, sales people at the junior level, So you identify those set of people who are part of a specific channel, and then you kind of carve out a learning map or a training map for those set of people.
Sure.
I think this is something which will continue. Second is, this famous saying, learning is in and training is out. Okay. Till the time, so you can only, you can provide a platform. You can nominate a person for a training program. But till the time the individual is not interested in his own learning, there's nothing that you can do.
Right.
A good organization will ensure that in the learning ecosystem, they've got various mechanisms available. The individual can go and dip into that medium and learn for himself. So either you curate training programs or you have a tuition reimbursement policy wherein he can pick up a training program on his own and kind of, the company reimburses them. There are classroom or other training programs that you nominate. So net, I think in the ecosystem, you got to kind of have all kinds of things. It can't just be, one medium or one way in which you're trying to kind of teach or train people or develop people within the system.
Sure. Anil, in your organization, do you incentivize leaders, if they learn by themselves, if they push themselves, like Vibhash said, go out and get enrolled in some training programs? Is there any such kind of a, program for your leaders? Sorry, you're on mute, Anil.
Sorry. We incentivize them by ensuring that we have, in the last 2 years pre-COVID, my L&D budgets actually have gone up almost, 6 folds in 2 years. 600%. And so we have a model where we work with some of the best the Harvards, the MITs, the Columbia's school, Chicago, some of the best, the IIM. We have customized programs for a set of people at the IIM Ahmedabad. We have a different set of, multi-industry cohorts at IIM Calcutta. So we invest a lot in our people. The point I also wanted to make, so that is incentive. So if you can say, and for some people, it could be as high as 50% of the fixed pay in terms of the investments we make or more. Because it comes back to the strategy of the organization, and how is my leadership and talent development aligned to that strategy, and how is my selection and hiring process aligned to that leadership and talent strategy. It's like Jeff Immelt was an individual contributor, and from individual contributor he moved to become GE CEO in about 19 years, I think 1982 to 2001. So you know, a lot of us should ask, HR professionals, L&D professionals should ask, who am I? I was reading this lovely article, I think it was a Korn Ferry white paper, which states, you know, do we know right at this point in time who my 7 potential CEOs are in the organization? And most of them could be sitting right at the front line level. So do I have a strategy in place to actually, invest? We tend to invest a lot, amongst our mid-management going up to senior, leadership level and above. So most of the dollars or, rupees are spent there, almost 50%, for a very small set of people, whereas actually it should be reverse. It should actually be spent more for our frontline people. So most succession planning processes also you will find is targeted at CEO and CEO -1 going down to -2, but not really running across the organization. So we invest a lot, and of course we also try and balance and see depending on the kind of organization we are, right? So do we want to grow at a steady state and become more deep verticalized and grow at a 10 to 15%, or do we want to encourage more general management skills and grow at a 30 to 40% year on year, and hence we encourage more horizontal based skills? So it really depends on the strategy of the organization as well, and based on that we have a good blend of what percent of people, leaders, for example, digital skills, tech-based skills, they are almost becoming, business critical now, it's almost part of business. So, and though some of those skills may not be well entrenched within, the traditional skills that are there, and maybe look for people from outside. So maybe a 50-50 model. For example, in a rural business, because we hire a lot of people, we have almost 70-80% of our businesses, people sit in rural. It's a very people-intensive model, and in the past, almost 90% of the people grew from within. We're now revisiting that strategy. Does it make sense? It should be probably a more balanced, whereas it was balanced for the rest of the organization. So those are some of the things that we look at. We always question ourselves and look at the foundational stuff, and look at the purpose of why we are doing what we are doing before tackling the issue.
Sure. Thanks. Very interesting. Vikram, a lot of L&D folks keep saying for leaders, we need to do coaching and not learning. I really don't know what works when. Your inputs on when leaders should actually go through coaching programs and when should they go through learning programs.
So there are two aspects of it, Neeti. One is, of course, as Vivash and Anil both were saying, there are a few aspects of business which is changing day in, day out. You can't say that training and learning is the same now. Learning, you have to keep learning. You have to keep learning the changing macro business environment around how you want to change your business model, how you want to do other things. So learning is something which is going to be constant. But at a level when one comes to a leadership role at a level where his attention span is not as much, and that's one of the challenges that we're looking virtually also doing leadership programs. I think a lot of us sitting here right now also on this webinar have multiple things that we are doing currently, right? So that's one of the bigger challenges that one has to look at. Coming back to your question, coaching is something that, of course, it's abused all over the world, the word coaching as of now. I understand where you're coming from. But the fact that if I have reached here and I don't know how to move ahead, I would need somebody to handhold me. So it's maybe you want to call it mentoring, maybe you call it coaching, maybe you call it somebody at that level. All leaders are not very comfortable sharing the dark, deep-rooted beliefs and deep-rooted areas. So that definitely is very seldom that it happens in an open environment where there are 20-25 other leaders. I think I heard somebody say once that leadership is not about people below you, it's about managing your peers and above. So I think it's an integral role in getting some very critical behavioral changes in people. Now, as you were earlier asking about incentivizing, if today my supervisor comes and says that tomorrow if you want to be a CPO of an organization, Vikram, these are the 4 things that are lacking in you, and this should be something that you should look at in changing in your behavior.
Right.
And then how do I go about changing that to achieve something higher than where I am? Is the incentive at a certain level? That's. I think I'll keep it there.
Sure, sure. Thanks. Uh, Pooja, question to you, is that how important is certification of credits for leaders? Or
I
need to just do a program and, anyway, I'm a leader, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, I think when you have this certification programs for credits, so I understand there are something called as internal credit and something called as external credit. So internal credit could be that a lot of organizations, and we do that as well. So when we have these succession planning frameworks and people are identified as critical role, critical positions, successors, obviously there are certain skills which are mapped to them and certain qualifications which are mapped to them, and if they still are not there, it helps them to engages and inspires to them to get those credits because it helps them to grow in the career.
Yeah.
External credit is equally very important because it gives you credibility in the external market as well. So it helps you that when you know that you've done specific courses, you've done certain specific certifications, it just not only helps you to increase your knowledge, but also helps you to get some external credibility. So I would say yes, it is important, but it totally depends that is it like an objective driven? Do you know why you're doing these certifications, or are you just doing it because it's going to add to your bucket of certifications and titles and qualifications? So if it is objective driven and if it is really important that is going to take you up in the career ladder or even up in a different career skill, definitely adds value. And that's something that we do pay a lot of attention within this organization.
Sure. But there's always this fear that when we talk about external certification and helping employees actually go beyond today's work but prepare themselves for future, whether leaders or their team members, there's this whole thing that comes up saying, what if he leaves my organization? So are we helping him just build their resume, or are we actually helping them develop a career within our organizations? Is there a fear like that anymore in organizations, Vibhash?
Neeti, yeah. So I'll just give you a few things that we've done within the organizations. All of us are interested in our own learning and development, but all of us, we are so busy with stuff that there is inertia for us to kind of, go and learn something or do something. Yeah. So what we've done is we've tried to gamify the whole learning ecosystem.
Okay.
And as part of this game, so what we did was we curated a set of courses which were relevant for a set of people. And based on the complexity of the course, there are certain points that you get.
Okay.
So if it's a difficult course that you're picking up, you get higher points. If there is a simpler course that you pick up, then you get lower points, so on and so forth. And you also do an assessment twice in a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, so one is you encourage people. So it's like a buffet of training courses which are available. You pick up based on what you think is relevant for you. We've curated these courses because we believe this is relevant for your professional development. Yeah. Go and pick up. Once you pick up, you get points. You also kind of, appear for an assessment or an exam and you get points. And based on the points that you collect at the end of the year, you get a certification, which we call it gold, bronze, silver, so on and so forth. And we also linked it to career growth.
Sure.
So there is reward, recognition, career growth. So, what happens is because there is, and zones, teams kind of compete with each other because everyone wants to ensure that, their teams have got the largest number of people who are gold certified, so on and so forth.
Right, right.
You're trying to gamify the whole thing. Sure. And people are interested in doing it because they're seeing some promotion coming, which is linked to their performance. So along with this, it's linked to your promotion and stuff like that.
Correct.
That's where it becomes very interesting. If you just kind of, say कि certification कर दो, तो मतलब हाँ करना है, but time नहीं है.
Exactly.
So, when there is a BIFM there, I think people tend to kind of do it a little more. There is interest in doing it, and you've got to create this environment and gamify the whole thing.
True, absolutely.
Neeti, you raised a very interesting point. I just got that when you just before speaking with Vibhash, where you said that aren't you afraid or aren't you worried that your leader will leave and go when you invest in him? We have this philosophy that you must invest in people so much that you always keep his skills current and, his skills competitive in the marketplace, such that he's always available, in the marketplace for I mean, keep his skills current, because research shows that, that leader or those people are least likely to leave. Because those employees will ask themselves, will my new employer also keep my skills current, and competitive? And if I'm growing in this organization and I'm getting, all my career progressions and, is in the right career path, etc., why would he leave? So very interesting question. So.
Actually, the choice is you invest in people and you fear that, they leave. The second option is you don't invest in people. You have people within the organization who stay and rot your organization. You would rather invest and take the risk of leaving.
Absolutely. Yeah. Try no training for a change and see what happens to your organization. Actually.
Yeah, and especially in India, because we've been seen growth phase for several decades, right? So what happens? You may have a poor leader, but the ecosystem is such that the results are now suddenly COVID come. So poor leaders also are successful during normal growth phases, and if you're stuck with such leaders in times like these, that's yeah.
True. Yeah, I mean, when the wind's behind your back, everyone's flying high, right? But when they're difficult times, I think that's where, and like you started, Anil, I think being resilient in this time is absolutely important. And I think and tough times obviously show the true skills of people, not just leaders. So
yeah, when the pandemic hit, a lot of search firms called me and said that there are headcount freezes, and will there be business to be made? I said you will have a lot of opportunities for business, and we've already seen 4 months and so many CEO positions happening in various organizations.
Absolutely,
I don't know whether you've picked it up. So that's related. The point's related. So
true, absolutely, yes. Vibhash, you wanted to add something?
No, I think the same thing in terms of, I don't think companies have a choice. If you want to survive, if you want to kind of grow, you've got to invest in your people. And if you fear not investing because they will leave, then what you're doing is you're breeding mediocrity. You have a set of people who are incompetent staying in the organization, which will rot the organization.
Yeah. So. Absolutely. So, during this discussion, I've heard assessments come in time and again, and something, that also we keep tinkering about is 360 degrees assessment important for leaders? Do you use any tools? And if you do, if you could just share this with all of us. Vikram, would you want to go first?
So I think 360 degree is only effective, and it's my personal view, on a level in an organization when it helps you guide, it helps you gauge the environment the leaders are creating around them. What's the organizational climate one creates around it? Right. If your assessment tool is able to figure that piece out, then combining, and I remember an exercise that we did it for one leader, then we did it a set for a function, then we did it for the whole organization, and then you come to actually understand the fabric of the leadership there. So is it like, are we very execution driven leadership that we have currently? Do we have a very, soft approach kind of a leadership? So what are my current business strategies and what kind of leadership I have? And do I need to now hire complementary or supplementary skills of the current fabric that I have? If an assessment is able to give you that, then I think it's more of a value add to the organization, aligning it to the strategy that you might have. Yeah. Also, 360 degree for a personal development is always good. However, how many people are mature enough to utilize it in the right way, and at what level are you utilizing it is also important aspect of gaining maximum value out of it.
Yeah. Any specific such assessment tools that you could recommend, Vikram?
So I think we did a workshop with Leapfrog, and we used Insights as one of our tools to understand the natural traits of our leaders, right up from the topmost leader to the VP level organization, or 85 of us went through the Insights to understand what exactly we have, and then we kind of matched that. Do I want an inclinated guy, aggressive guy in an HR domain, or is my sales head what kind of a personality is it. So I think that way it helped us match and do some restructuring in between, which has worked really well for us.
Okay, 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 great. Anyone else? Pooja, do you use 360-degree assessment for leaders?
Yes, we do. And in fact, Vikram really said it very right when he said that a 360-degree assessment really requires and should be executed depending on the maturity of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, very interestingly, Neeti, 15 years back when I started my career, my first project was all around 360-degree. So, I did this 15 years back when I was just like an MBA student passed out, and for a very, very renowned organization. So I was very fortunate to have that orientation to 360 well before the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not new. This is not new to organizations, and a lot of organizations have done it. But time and again, with the experience of different organizations executing, some are successful, and for some people it's a disaster, because we need to be sure if the organization is mature enough to really take up 360-degree.
Yeah.
People really want to go ahead executing a 360-degree feedback system in their organization. Very important is, because 360 is a perception. We need to keep that in mind. You are collecting feedback from your stakeholders, from different stakeholders, which is a perception. You don't have enough evidence to say whether that perception is right or wrong. All that you as a receiver of the feedback is you can just have a report saying that, okay, this is what people, different stakeholders think about me, and what is it that I can benefit out of it. So it's obviously on the individual to first accept that perception. We experimented something very interesting in my current organization, which fortunately we did in the month of Jan 2020. So it's fairly recent, just before COVID broke out. And what we did this time is just not doing a perception test, but we actually clubbed it with a virtual assessment. And there are some beautiful tools and beautiful companies that do this very, very systematic virtual assessment, where you take the participant through different kind of assessment tools, like you do in a classroom, an assessment center. It's a virtual assessment center. So what you have at the end of the day is you have a 360 feedback report, which is a perception report, and you have a virtual assessment report, which is actually a performance report. And as a individual who's going through a 360, I'm actually able to match my performance and the perception feedback that I received. A lot of times, another thing that a lot of organizations make, I will not say a mistake, but maybe unknowingly, is a 360-degree, if you want to do an assessment, has to be very focused.
Right.
You cannot run a 360 on 11 competency, 12 competency, or a list of 15 competency. I mean, it's not fair to the individual who you're giving a feedback report. At the end of the day, nobody is perfect, right? We're all learning. And so it's important that depending upon what is the objective, why are you doing a 360-degree assessment is very important to define. And depending on that, pick up the competencies that you want the individual to get the report, and pick up the assessment if you want the report and the assessment as well. And at the end, what really works well is a good feedback mechanism. And the feedback mechanism is not focused on convincing the individual to accept the report. It shouldn't be. It's not the entire objective of 360. The feedback mechanism is to help the individual to become better with that report that he has in hand. Now leave it to the individual to accept it or not to accept it. And that's how 360 becomes accepted in the organization. When you don't put any decisions on 360, but you're only doing it for the development of the individual to make him a better professional or a person in the personal, it really works. So, and we've used a lot of tools, assessment tools. I'm a big fan of assessment tools, by the way. So I use a lot of assessment tools, whether it's a part of a learning and development intervention, or it's a part of, some performance mechanism. And in the 360, we use something called as the SHLOCF, the competency model. So you have a lot of these tools which can actually give you input linked to your competency. So once you know which competency you're using in the 360, you can have a psychometric assessment as well, linking to the competency. So I think tools help, but at the same time, a good understanding of the report is required. So you can't just deliver the report and end the process, but a good feedback mechanism to help the individual read the report, understand the report, and then absorb what is given in the report is equally important.
Sure. I think very well said, Pooja. You explained it, and as we can see, I mean, assessment is a passion for you as well. So passionately you've explained the whole process. Thanks. So, keeping the time in mind, and Pinank has just pinged me that we'll need some time for Q&As. One last question to all four of you, because every business keep asking about what's the return on investment that I get if I make an investment on learning, or and give you certain L&D budgets. So how is it that it gets measured in your organization, and what is it that you do to ensure that businesses actually view this as an investment and not as an expense line item? Anil, I'll start with you again.
I think I always, more than measuring, I always believe that value is perceived in the eyes of the receiver. So, deliver such great programs, for the business that the business will ask for more.
Yeah.
That in spite of us spending, upping our budgets by 600%, when the business leaders will, come back to my L&D team and say, that's fantastic, I think I need more of this. And then they're constantly engaging with you. So over the last couple of years, we spend less time in spending a lot of time in taking feedback from people, filling forms, and doing all the like performance management. We tend to spend so much time at the end of the year doing all those exercises, when that time should be spent on focusing on the forthcoming year. It's better to spend time on the KRA setting and having meaningful conversations, and doing constant assessments throughout the year. Similar here, so deliver great programs which are aligned to your strategy and have catered to all. So of course we do mandatory compliance onboarding programs, but we also have programs that that run across the entire spectrum of the organization, right from individual contributors to technical programs to digital folks. So digital are the new age skills, and we need to have a complete new way to look at and not the traditional form. So delivering at the end of the day value to the business to us is more important. I mean, if you deliver value, the profit will come. So I would have a conversation with my leaders, constantly asking them that are they happy, get feedback, through those channels more than anything else. Yeah. And look, for example, last year we decided to in-source training. We decided to set up 19 learning centers. We had moved from a in-source model to a outsource model, where we had a lot of off-role trainers coming in, and the content development was all with us. But having grown to 17,000 people and seeing the value, especially in our kind of business, so that was fantastic for the L&D team and for human resources to actually, for the business to actually say that, hey, you guys are doing a fantastic. So I think, and that's what I meant at the beginning, value is seen in the eyes of the receiver.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're right. Absolutely. So is really what you're saying is there's not just a mathematical calculation to getting the return on investments, but there's a lot more around creating value for the investments that businesses are making on learning, right, Anil?
Yeah. At the end of the day, you're growing at 30-40%. Profits are, growing. A couple of years ago, we more than doubled profits year on year. So so I don't want to take credit, saying that L&D did this, because that's where the problem occurs. It's all a collaborative effort, and what you're delivering is working for your business. Similarly, there are several people doing several things, and when all the dots join, I think that's when great outcomes, take place.
Sure, absolutely. Pooja, how do you measure, or you don't measure ROI on investments?
No, we do measure. Interestingly, what we do is, in L&D, when we actually start designing the calendar, we have two kind of levels of programs that we deliver. One is something which is just like a basic level. A basic level, any kind of program which is just required because the individual needs it to do better in his current role. And the second level is the advanced level. And the advanced level is somewhere where I think a clear deliverable is to be measured. And I personally believe that today L&D has to move beyond the happy sheets. It's of course very important to give a wow factor to the participants. So yes, at the end of the session, people must see value of the time that they have spent. But beyond happy sheets and wow factor are the matrices that business really looks into, and it's fair. There's an investment. You're talking about hardcore money going into development, right? So it's not happening something free of cost for the business. And where you have an investment, you expect a return. For us in Piaggio, like I said, since we have advanced courses, we are linked with clear deliverables. I mean, how many of your people have actually are ready to move from frontline to middle management? How many of people have got an internal growth opportunity? How many promotions have happened within the internal pool that we have? Then how many, what leadership development experiences correlate to faster promotions? And these are some of the matrices which we are using year on year, and there is a clear correlation and a deliverable. Not important that you succeed with every course, but it's at least important as a professional, L&D professional, to know where and what result did it reap to the organization.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think it does make sense of what you're saying. And I think the matrices that you mentioned probably are good indicators of the input that you guys are giving to your team members. Vikram?
I think there are a couple of two aspects to it. One is, of course, and citing the current environment, L&D's role has now become very important, as Anil and Vibhash and Pooja were saying earlier. I think we have to play a very important role when it comes to helping business bounce back in the current scenario.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is measurable. A lot of is measurable. It's not the measurable effectiveness of the L&D department. It is the measurable effectiveness of the overall effort of the organization to come together. For an example, one of our businesses, the key deliverable or a key strategy point is going direct to our customers. And currently we are reskilling the entire sales team currently on that. And the direct incremental direct business is going to be a very clear matrix that I would look at if this has been not an effectiveness of the L&D team, but the effectiveness of the complete effort.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The second aspect of it is, if I am on drop of a hat getting replacements of positions internally and I'm able to handhold, groom my people internally, then I think leaders are happy and they will not look for any ROI other than that they don't have to go outside and spend,
Yeah.
If I am able to create an environment where, other than going for niche skills, if we have an organic pipeline of leaders coming up, then there is enough return on investment that the leaders at a CEO, CXO level feel that the organization is, giving them capability building. Lastly, it's about how ready one is, how fast one is ready to the changing business environment and the model. Is also an effectiveness that one can look at on the way of the organization dealing with the learning practices.
Absolutely. So Vibhash, would retention or higher retention be one of the metrics for an ROI on learning?
Neeti, I think if I was the owner of a company and if I was to kind of deploy capital in the organization, obviously I'm doing it for a commercial purpose. And if I've got a large training team that's spending money every year, and if I'm not seeing anything coming out, obviously I will question. Okay, so ROI is a very fair question to kind of ask in the first place. As far as we are concerned, sales training teams, all of them have business, 50% of their KPIs are related to business matrices. If you're training all these sales people and if the productivity is not going up, or if you're not seeing any shift in the needle as far as the business KPIs are concerned, then I think it's a fair question to ask for the CEO or for the training head, why are we doing this in the first place?
Right.
Behavioral training is slightly difficult. When you do behavioral trainings, whether it's communication skills or strategic thinking, so on and so forth, expecting results in just 12 months time, I think is being over ambitious. Okay, these are investments that you make, but eventually this investment should pay off. And these investments should pay off in terms of better retention, or tomorrow when there are positions that get created within the organization, you have an internal pipeline that kind of takes care of these requirements, because there is an internal talent pipeline that fills up these positions, so on and so forth. But if you don't see some of this stuff happening, then I think it's fair that we introspect and ask ourselves this question: are we doing it just because we've got a budget and we want to feel good, and because it's a job that is it just a tick mark activity, or are we doing it and is it really making a difference to the business? I think the ROI question is a fair question, and it's not just true for L&D, it's true for every business.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, so okay, I think I've overshot my time and Pinang continues to ping me. So thank you, Anil, Pooja, Vikram, and Vibhash. I think we'll move on to the Q&A section. Pinang, could you want to take over?
Thanks, Neeti. So the first question is for Pooja. By the way, Pooja, the question is that since the auto industry is hit very bad, right? And obviously it is one of the industries that is not going to recover anytime soon. What do you think is going to be the learning and development agenda that an organization like you should focus on?
All right. As rightly mentioned, the auto industry definitely is going through a slowdown. But like I mentioned earlier, it's an opportunity in disguise. For automobile industry, where did we ever think that we would actually be selling four-wheeler, three-wheeler, two-wheeler on e-commerce? And this is an opportunity where the organizations must look forward. If you have an e-commerce platform, I think as an L&D team, try to focus on enriching and enhancing the digital skills of your people. Very important. I mean, it's not necessary that every employee of the organization is knowing the social media skills, the social media platform. I think it's an opportunity, and focus on digitization, focus on cascading the skills across the organization. And let me tell you, because we've done this in the organization, in my company, there's a direct link of this particular training to what the business reaps later from this kind of training. Because the better the people in the digitization skills, the better the output in terms of real businesses. So I think it's an opportunity where we can do programs which are directly contributing in the organization business result. Another program that comes to my mind is the lean thinking program. So, because it's a manufacturing company, a lot of times we talk about how do you reduce or how do you curtail manufacturing cost. And we did this program of lean thinking directly linked to projects which were actually giving you cost saving results. So this was another success of the just last 3 months. So these are 2 programs that I'm talking about. There's a whole lot of programs that directly contribute to business, and this is how L&D in automobile can directly contribute today. So it gives you, it's an opportunity. Treat it as an opportunity of doing programs which can reap benefits immediately to the business.
Okay, thank you for that, Pooja. This question is for Anil. Anil, I think the question, I'll just summarize the question. The question is basically asking that since we are on the topic of leadership development, how much of a contribution the leadership people themselves have to make in terms of their own development? Do they contribute in terms of deciding what should work, what will work for them? And how does the HR team integrate to bring to them what they feel will really help them in their chosen profession and chosen role?
So one is, for organizing, these are board level positions, right? The board also has a responsibility for, the succession planning and for the development of the, top leader, the CEO. So that drives, and we work, very closely with the board and the CEO to ensure that we, a little while ago, Pooja spoke about 360-degree. I am a big fan of 360-degree, having used it extensively. But over a period of time, I also feel, culture of the organization, maturity of the organization, and all that is important. I've used DecisionWise, Hey Group, I've used Conferry, I've used several tools. I think it's a fantastic development tool for leaders. But over a period of time, I feel it has to have a combination of, yes, competencies required for the next level, depending on how the organization is shaping for the future. So those competencies defined, and where there are gaps, where the leader is concerned. But that's again based on, competencies and what kind of experiences then you can provide, that particular leader, and what kind of interventions then, should be put in place. But the more important part is also, what are the behaviors that you can't see, the trait-centered drivers. And can you then put a tool in place, an assessment tool, like a leadership assessment, and there are several good ones available out there that can actually identify what will have the maximum impact and what needs to, along with, the coaching and conversations and, the right mentoring. And so I think it's a fairly well-defined process for, best-in-class organizations to invest in their top leader, if that's what the question was, working with the board, with the CEO, with HR, to ensure that the right development investments are made, so that the leader is future ready for the kind of plans, 5-year plans. We revisit them every year that need to be delivered for the kind of based on what competition we have and how the environment is changing, as we speak. Okay. I hope I've answered. I mean, that was the question, right?
Yes, Anil, thank you so much. So I think this question is open for anybody who wants to take it. So there's a question which says that my organization did not have any digital content ready. We still are struggling on that. So if anybody can help in terms of some very quick ways of creating some content that can be reached out in terms of more number of employees. So what are some of the indigenous ways we can create digital content so that most of the employees in my organization can benefit out of it?
So my answer to that question would be, rather than trying to create content, curate content. There's a lot of content available on the net. I think try to find out what's relevant for your people, for your learner, curate that content and make it available to people. You don't have to create everything on your own. Don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's already so much content available out there. Just curate it and give it to them. So you're doing the hard work of trying to kind of gather the right information and then telling people that, okay, you can go dip into it and, take whatever you think is relevant.
Okay, fair enough, Vibhash.
I totally agree, because I think there's a lot of content available. But if you're struggling with really finding out how do you go about evaluating the content, I think there are some of the platforms there are a couple of platforms which are available with putting a lot of content together on the platform. So you just need to go on one platform and you have all this Coursera and edX and name the courses, and it's available on the platform. So why don't you go and explore that platform and just pick up the courses? And the best thing about online platforms today is that they're helping you create a learning path as well. So they actually it's available with a path created for the individual, for the learner. Okay. I hope this helps you.
I hope too. So, so that's about it, Neeti. I got only 3 questions. So,
on the digital content, I just want to tell whoever asked that question, the best, like Abraham Lincoln once famously said, the best way to predict your future is to create it. We had a similar challenge, in our digital business. So we had a really smart young kid there, an IIM Ahmedabad, IIT Kharagpur kind of person who's been there for a couple of years or 1.5 years. We took her out and we said that we'll make you the head of, learning and development for our digital business. So, just talking to those, our digital business, so folks, you can actually come up with such fantastic ideas, because this is new. You have to create something which is based on your context and what will work for you. So create it. Yeah.
Okay. So multiple point of views there, and I'm sure the person who asked the question will make his own decision. Neeti, that's about it. I just got 3 questions on my private chat.
Sure. Okay. So, I just on the content bit, something that, we ourselves also keep working on, that while content is a commodity, like Vibhash said, there's just so many things available outside in the market. I think pick and choose, make your decisions, what's relevant, what's not relevant to you, and what needs to be customized has to be created internally. And online does not mean that you just go out and create, completely a digital form, or something that, you have to have a 1 hour session or a 40-minute session or a 20-minute session. There is just so much permutation combination available on content creation these days. There's just easy tools available for yourself, right? And the fact that not just pure self-learning, but virtual learning came in the moment the pandemic happened and all of us continue working from wherever we were. I think there's just too many options available right now for us to buy content, create content, and actually create it on the go. So with that, I think we're just at 5:30, so good time. Thank you, Anil, Pooja, Vikram, and Vibhash. I think it was an interesting conversation. I have learned a lot, and we will surely implement some of the strategies in our organizations. We ourselves do a lot of open enrollment programs, something what Vibhash was mentioning, where we ask people to pick and choose. We ask actually people to apply for programs, and we go the whole hog, write your application, write why you should be chosen. And once that happens, credits are given and, attached to performance appraisal and stuff like that. So obviously there's a lot happening. We don't see an end to this pandemic anytime soon, but I'm sure there'll be newer things coming up in the future. And at some point, hopefully all of us will come together and discuss how life has moved into being a better, environment than what it is right now. So thank you panelists, thank you participants. Have a good evening, have a good weekend, and take care and stay safe.
Thanks, Nidhi. Thanks, Vibhash, Vikram, Pooja.